Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what alternatives are being piloted to enable older patients to be cared for outside of hospitals.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Our approach to reform focuses on primary and community care, aiming to shift the balance of care where appropriate for people and their families. Our immediate focus on enhancing capacity in the community, and work is underway to increase hospital-at-home provision to 2,000 beds by December 2026, meaning people can receive hospital-level care in their own homes. To ensure all of our population can access a hospital-at-home service that meets their needs, we have commissioned Healthcare Improvement Scotland to support integration authorities to adapt services to meet the needs of rural and island communities.
Liam Kerr.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary, but the Hospital at Home initiative, which you mentioned, is not currently available in Aberdeenshire. Following a pilot in West Hill, the Health and Social Care Partnership had to pull out due to a lack of support and resources from the Scottish Government. It's available just a few miles away in the city. So the Shire is left with stacked ambulances, two-tier healthcare, GP practices shutting down and village hospitals shutting. Cabinet Secretary, is there anywhere else in Scotland which won't be running hospital at home? And will he now provide resources to the Shire for it to proceed?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very grateful to Liam Kerr for his questions. As he'll know, decisions on how to deliver services for local communities are ultimately for integration authorities to make. In this case, Aberdeenshire Integration Joint Board. But following their escalation, officials have been working with NHS Grampian to confirm the additional funding based on the development of their whole system plan, taking into account the recommendations that have been made within the KPMG report. And through the Assurance Board process, extensive work is underway with NHS Grampian to develop a robust whole system work so that their share of the £85 million of unscheduled care funding can be allocated, and I would expect Hospital at Home to be part of that consideration.
Brief supplementary, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I very much welcome the investment the Scottish Government is making in the Hospital at Home initiative to be the biggest hospital in Scotland with 2,000 beds by the end of next year. Hospital at Home is allowing my elderly patients and my constituent to benefit from being around their home comforts with family and friends nearby, and I very much welcome that. But beyond this, can the Cabinet Secretary outline what more is being done to support elderly and vulnerable patients to be treated more effectively in hospitals? For example, how will the new frailty units work?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. David Torrance is absolutely right that Hospital at Home can be transformational in terms of the delivery of services, and the fact that we're moving to 2,000 beds by the end of next year will make Hospital at Home the largest hospital within Scotland. For people living with frailty, hospitals can increase the risk of harm if their needs are not identified quickly and if our systems and services are poorly coordinated, and that's why we've committed to delivering direct access to specialist frailty teams across every emergency department in Scotland. This will mean that frail patients with complex needs will bypass our busy A&Es to receive the specialist care and support that they need, minimising the risk of prolonged hospital stay. And by providing coordinated multi-agency care both at the front door of our EDs and in the community, we can provide the right care in the right place, helping people experiencing frailty to remain as independent as possible.
Question number 2, Jackie Bailey.
To ask the Scottish Government for what reason it is reportedly downgrading fire station services across the country, including in Helensburgh.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Presiding Officer, I think it's very important to be clear. The Scottish Government is not downgrading fire station services across Scotland. Decisions on the location of fire stations, along with vehicles, equipment and the people needed to deal with responding to emergencies, is a matter for the Scottish Fire Rescue Service Chief Officer. The emergencies Scottish Fire Rescue Service responds to have changed significantly over the years. For example, dwelling fires have reduced by 20% since 2013, and at the same time, we do see the risks of flooding and wildfires increasing. It is therefore sensible for the Scottish Fire Rescue Service to carry out a service delivery review to ensure its resources are in the right place at the right time, and the Scottish Fire Rescue Service is currently consulting on its review with a closing date of the 16th of September, and until then, the results of the consultation have been properly analysed. No decisions have been taken.
Jackie Bailey.
Can I thank the Minister for her response, but I have to say it's the Scottish Government that have cut the fire service budget by millions of pounds. So ultimately, it is your responsibility. Now, the proposal to downgrade Helensburgh Fire Station is quite simply reckless. The station already has a problem with recruiting sufficient retained firefighters to cover the existing appliances, never mind the additional overnight cover under these proposals. In the previous year, the availability of appliances was only at 50% at night and a staggeringly low 20% at the weekend. That lack of coverage makes the downgrading short-sighted. Will the Minister agree with me and her SNP colleague Brendan O'Hara that this proposal is reckless and should be scrapped?
Minister.
Thank you. Firstly, I think I need to highlight since 2017 to 18 there has been substantial year-on-year increases of funding to support the Scottish Fire Rescue Service, and the current annual budget is over £97 million more than it was in 2017 to 2018. This year alone has an additional £18.8 million in support for frontline services. Now, we understand this is not a cut-costing exercise. The Scottish Fire Rescue is undertaking a service delivery review, and there is a live public full consultation, and I encourage everybody to take part in that consultation.
Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have been contacted by constituents who have expressed concerns over the change at working patterns at Helensburgh Fire Station and as well as Mulgai Fire Station. Last month, I met with representatives from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service covering West of Scotland, where I expressed the concerns of local residents. The representatives I spoke to admitted that response times could increase as on-call firefighters would have to travel from their homes to the station and then to the destination. Therefore, does the Minister agree that this model risks putting lives in danger?
Minister.
Thank you. And no, I do not agree with the member's assumption. As I said, this is an operational issue for Scottish Fire Rescue Service. No decisions have currently been made, and I would encourage the member and her constituents to take part in the consultation.
Question number 3, Martin Whitfield.
Officer, to ask the Scottish Government how it will deliver on its commitments in the promise in light of the publication Education Outcomes for Looked After Children 2023-24, showing a decline in most key educational outcomes.
Minister Natalie Dononis.
I appreciate Mr Whitfield's concerns. However, I do think it's important not to lose sight of the positive difference in educational outcomes over the long term, where we see the gap in the proportion of children achieving 1 SCQF level 5 or better has reduced by over 20 percentage points between 2009-10 and 23-24. Now, we've introduced a range of targeted support measures such as the Care Experience Student Bursary, the Skills Development Scotland Mentoring Scheme, and providing over £70 million to local authorities through the Scottish Attainment Challenge to support care experienced children and young people's attainment and wellbeing. However, I appreciate the measurements in 23-24 where progress was static or showing small declines require increased focus, and it's important for us to understand how our investment could be more impactful.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm grateful to the Minister for that response. Schools in Scotland must be ambitious for care experienced children and ensure they have all they need to thrive. The independent care review contained in the promise, and yet the results show the percentage leaving school early is rising. 10-point gap in positive destinations. These statistics are a damning picture of the SNP's government's failure to keep the promise. And what's more concerning from the Minister's answer, the government don't appear to understand why. Is that the case?
Minister.
I don't agree with all of that, no. I think these statistics show that we do need to go further to continue those positive trends that I've referred to that are in the long term. In relation to these statistics, I think it's good to see an increase in the proportion of looked-after leavers going on to positive destinations 9 months after leaving school, and that means that we now have more children and young people from the most challenging circumstances getting the chance to succeed at school and in life. Now, we and key partner agencies, like local authorities, need to accelerate our efforts to keep the promise. And earlier this week, the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for Education met with local authority directors of education to reflect upon the progress of 10 years of the Scottish Attainment Challenge, but also to look ahead at what more we need to do to give more children a chance to get the skills and the qualifications they need to succeed in life.
Willie Rennie.
The Minister will know about reports of 15-minute timetables for care experienced children. That means they attend school for just 15 minutes in a day without any other support when they leave the school grounds. Now, that, in my view, is exclusion by another name, and it should be stopped, as was stated in the promise. So what investigation has the Minister done into the 15-minute timetables?
Minister.
I think Mr Rennie refers to exclusion, and I've spoken about this previously in the Chamber and at committee. Our national policy on exclusion has a strong focus on approaches that can be used to prevent the need for exclusion. Exclusion should be the last resort and, of course, when used, should be a proportionate response where there is no appropriate alternative. Now, Mr Rennie also refers to 15-minute timetables. Now, I'm not going to go into specific cases, but there can be a number of reasons why children or the school setting may not be the appropriate place for a child at a certain point in that child's life. I think there are a number of measures that the Scottish Government are taking. Some of those I've already alluded to. Also around the virtual school network, which is looking at a child's specific needs and how to build an education around that, and also in transitioning them back into a school setting. So there are a number of measures that the Scottish Government are taking to tackle this and ensure that care experienced children and young people get the education that they need.
Question number 4, Davy Russell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's to ask the Scottish Government regarding its definition of what constitutes substantial damp and mould in a home, and at what threshold such conditions are considered necessary to require remedial action by social landlords.
Cabinet Secretary Barry McCallum.
Presiding Officer, all homes in Scotland are required by law to meet the minimum tolerable standard, which requires housing to be substantially free from rising or penetrating damp. The Scottish Government developed guidance for local authorities on the tolerable standard, which includes guidance on assessing damp. Every case is different, and assessors are expected to use this guidance, as well as their professional judgment, to assess whether a house is substantially free from damp on a case-by-case basis. Damp and mould is an issue I take extremely seriously, which is why I committed to bring Awaab's law in across social and private rented sectors from March 26.
Davy Russell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Scottish Home Condition Survey, in its most recently published data, finds that 10%, that is 250,000 of the homes in Scotland, have damp and mould. For 2 decades, this has been an issue that has been actively monitored. As woeful as that is, it is not spread evenly across the population. For low-income families living in rented accommodation, they are all too often left at the whim of rogue landlords and big insurance companies who all too often don't put the householder first. They take the tact of ignore, delay, and then hopefully the householder will either give up or go away, putting numerous hurdles in front of them. The risk to human life associated with having damp and mould conditions present in the family home is far too great to leave the family protection to woolly legislation. Does the Cabinet Secretary seriously believe it goes far enough?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, to frame Davy Russell's question another way, you could say that the Scottish House Condition Survey in 2023 showed that 90% of homes in Scotland were free from damp, condensation and mould. But do I think that goes far enough? No. That's why this week we have confirmed that we will implement Awaab's law, starting with damp and mould across both the private and social rented sectors from spring next year.
Thank you. Question number 5, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports the food sector to export to international markets.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Clearly, food exports are vital to our national and rural economies, and in 2024, food exports were worth £2.1 billion. Now, we have announced an increase in the export support we provide to Scottish companies through the 6-point export plan, which builds on the significant support we already provide to Scottish exporters, such as the £705,000 we provided this financial year towards the Scotland Food and Drink Export Plan, helping to exploit the most significant opportunities there are for Scotland. The UK Government must secure an EU SPS agreement to remove the complex and costly barriers to trade and with our largest single export market, something we have consistently called for.
Karen Adam.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Scotland's mackerel industry is a global success story, now accounting for a fifth of the Japanese market. But processors tell me they are worried about a possible significant quota cut in 2026, which might put their growth at risk. How will the Scottish Government work to ensure processors have access to product so Scotland can continue building on its export success? And would the Minister meet with me and industry representatives to discuss this challenge?
Minister.
Karen Adam mentioned the success of the mackerel sector. It is a global success, but there will be scientific advice will be published at the end of this month. We have secured bilateral arrangements with Norway and the Faroe Islands, increasing the UK's quota by over 26,000 tonnes in 2025, the vast majority of which comes to Scotland. Following the introduction of amended economic link licence conditions, we estimate that an additional £52 million worth of mackerel was landed into Scotland in 2023 and 2024. We met with the Scottish Pelagic Processors Association on the 22nd of July in Peterhead, and I'm very happy to consider another meeting to discuss further.
Thank you. Question number 6, Stephen Kerr.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with local authorities regarding solutions to the housing emergency.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallum.
Since declaring the housing emergency, we have taken an activist and interventionist approach, working extensively with local authorities, particularly those experiencing the most acute housing pressures. Over the summer, I met extensively with partners across the housing sector, including local authorities and COSLA, understanding their challenges, hearing their proposed solutions, and much of that fed into the Housing Emergency Action Plan, which I presented to Parliament this week.
Stephen Kerr.
Scotland's biggest city is enveloped in a homelessness crisis, which is impacting all of central Scotland. 44% of people presenting as homeless in Glasgow come from asylum seeker households, and asylum seeker families also make up more than half of all temporary accommodation placements and over 60% of children in such housing. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the SNP policy of open borders would only make the housing emergency worse?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Stephen Kerr, not for the first time in this chamber, should be utterly ashamed of the contributions that he is making. Along with the contributions from his colleague Craig Hoy on a change of character in the south of Scotland, he too should be ashamed. Scotland is an open, welcoming, inclusive country, and the homelessness prevention support that we provide is for everybody in this country.
Question number 7, Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I apologise for being slightly late for this session at the beginning. To ask the Scottish Government regarding the future award of any grants or loans to arts or public performance venues, whether it or any public authority, including Creative Scotland, will require applicants to observe and respect freedom of expression under the law in order to be eligible for financial support, and that failing to do so will require any such funding provided to be repaid.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
Freedom of expression is vital to the culture sector, in which the exploration of new ideas and debate are key to innovation. It's for individual artists and cultural organisations to engage with others in debate and discussion as they see fit, and therefore Creative Scotland does not include conditions relating to freedom of expression within its funding terms and conditions. Clearly, though, all organisations, whether publicly funded or not, must operate within the wider framework of the law.
Fergus Ewing.
I commend the Cabinet Secretary for his masterful ambiguity, but an arts venue in Edinburgh was awarded £608,000 of taxpayers' money. And then it went on, Presiding Officer, to ban, to censor and to cancel our very own Deputy First Minister, asserting that she was somehow a threat to the safety and well-being of their staff. Now, will the Scottish Government unequivocally condemn this ludicrous decision, but even more important, prevent it from ever happening again by making it clear that any grant of taxpayers' cash will be clawed back from offenders? Otherwise, the Government is sending out a message that Scotland is where censorship rules okay.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, I think the record has been put very straight on the issue that Mr. Ewing directly asked of me, but I'm sure he would acknowledge that there have been long-standing examples in relation to freedom of expression in our national and cultural life and issues of controversy. This is not new. I am a strong supporter of the freedom of expression, but also in recognising the arm's-length relationship between Creative Scotland and ministers for very, very good reasons. He will be aware that there is currently a review ongoing into Creative Scotland, and I'll look very closely to any recommendations that they have in relation to Mr Ewing's question. Indeed, he will no doubt have made a submission to that review. I'll be happy to see if he wishes to forward it to me.
Thank you. That concludes general questions.